Hi everybody. I know it's been a while since we've done a reading video, and we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday in chapter 14 um, during the live reading on Zoom. So if you were not there yesterday to listen to the live reading, I will do a brief overview of what we read in the first half of chapter 14, but I would strongly suggest going back and reading the beginning of chapter 14 so that you're not totally lost. The beginning of chapter 14, we get the first real painful memory that Jonas has received, and he experiences breaking his leg. And this kind of opens the door for the giver to give him even more painful memories consistently, because obviously it's part of the job. And this causes Jonas to get really upset and frustrated, because obviously he does not want to be the one to have to carry around all this pain all the time for everybody else. And he even questions the giver about this. Why is it just them that has to be the ones to carry these memories? And it's the idea of the suffering of the few, or sacrificing the few for the many. So Jonas and the giver are the few, and the rest of the community are the many, and they are sacrificing them, meaning that they're making them experience the painful memory so that nobody else has to. And the giver doesn't really have an answer for Jonas, except to say that it's always been that way, and he really isn't sure how to change it or if they can even change it. So Jonas is feeling very alone and frustrated and sad, obviously, because he has to carry around all this pain. We also get some more information about Gabriel, which is the little baby that Jonas's dad is taking care of, who was announced uncertain by the committee of elders and has a year to kind of catch up with the rest of the new children. It is reported that he's doing well, except for still at night he doesn't sleep through the night, and Jonas's dad is worried that they will still decide to release him even after all of the work that he's put in. That's about where we left off. One more thing I forgot to mention. Jonas's dad does bring up the possibility of a birth mother having twins soon. And in this community, twins do not exist. I mean, they do in some cases if they're fraternal twins, meaning they don't look alike, and usually they are different genders, meaning one's a boy and one's a girl. They would be okay to stay in the community. So if you're familiar with Chase and Kate Dewar, they are fraternal twins. They would be okay to stay in the community. Now, if they're identical twins, who are being born in the community, two identical twin boys, because they look alike, one of them has to be released. And so an example of this would be Levi and Ryder McCoy, who are also in 7th grade. They are identical twins. Actually, I think one of them told me that they're mirror twins, which, either way, they look exactly alike and they're both male. So they weigh them both at birth in the community, and whoever is heavier gets to stay, and unfortunately the smaller one has to be released. And so Jonas is kind of thinking about that, and that's where we left off. Jonas, listening, thought suddenly about the bridge and how standing there he had wondered what lay elsewhere. Was there someone there waiting who would receive the tiny released twin? Would it grow up elsewhere, not knowing ever that in the community lived a being who looked exactly the same? For a moment he felt a tiny fluttering hope that he knew was quite foolish. He hoped that it would be Larissa waiting. Larissa, the old woman he had bathed. He remembered her sparkling eyes, her soft voice, her low chuckle. Fiona had told him recently that Larissa had been released at a wonderful ceremony. But he knew that the old were not given children to raise. Larissa's life elsewhere would be quiet and serene, as befit the old. She would not welcome the responsibility of nurturing a new child who needed feeding and care and would likely cry at night. Mother, father, he said, the idea coming to him unexpectedly. Why don't we put Gabriel's crib in my room tonight? I know how to feed and comfort him, and it would let you and father get some sleep. Father looked doubtful. You sleep so soundly, Jonas. What if his restlessness didn't wake you? It was Lily who answered that. If no one goes to tend to Gabriel, she pointed out, he gets very loud. He'd wake all of us if Jonas slept through it. Father laughed. You're right, Lily Billy. All right, Jonas, let's try it just for tonight. I'll take the night off, and we'll let Mother get some sleep too. Gabriel slept soundly for the earliest part of the night. Jonas in his bed lay awake for a while. From time to time, he raised himself on one elbow, looking over at the crib. The new child was on his stomach, his arms relaxed beside his head, and his eyes closed, and his breathing regular and undisturbed. Finally, Jonas slept too. Then, as the middle hours of the night approached, the noise of Gabriel's restlessness woke Jonas. The new child was turning under his covers, flailing his arms and beginning to whimper. Jonas rose and went to him. Gently he patted Gabriel's back. Sometimes that was all it took to lull him back to sleep, but the new child still squirmed fretfully under his hand. Still patting rhythmically, Jonas began to remember the wonderful sail that the giver had given him not long before. A bright, breezy day on a clear turquoise lake, and above him the white sail of the boat blowing as he moved along in the brisk wind. He was not aware of giving the memory, but he suddenly realized that it was becoming dimmer, that it was sliding through his hand into the being of the new child. Gabriel became quiet. Startled, Jonas pulled back what was left of the memory with a burst of will. He removed his hand from the little back and stood quietly beside the crib. To himself, he called the memory of the sail forward again. It was still there, but the sky was less blue. The gentle motion of the boat was slower, the water of the lake more murky and clouded. He kept it for a while, soothing his own nervousness at what had occurred, then let it go and returned to his bed. Once more, toward dawn, the new child woke and cried out. Again, Jonas went to him. This time he quite deliberately placed his hand firmly on Gabriel's back and released the rest of the calming day on the lake. And Gabriel slept. But now Jonas lay awake thinking. He no longer had any more than a wisp of the memory, and he felt a small lack where it had been. He could ask the giver for another sail, he knew, a sail perhaps on ocean next time. For Jonas had a memory of ocean now, and he knew what it was. He knew that there were sailboats there too, and memories yet to be acquired. He wondered, though, if he should confess to the giver that he had given a memory away. He was not yet qualified to be a giver himself, nor had Gabriel been selected to be a receiver. That he had this power frightened him. He decided not to tell. Before we move on to chapter 15, I want to kind of break this ending down really quick. So, the reason that we have information about Gabriel in this chapter is to kind of preface this instance. So if you remember, when Jonas's dad brought Gabriel home for the first time, the first thing Lily pointed out was the fact that Gabriel had pale eyes like Jonas. We also know that the giver has pale eyes. So obviously being the receiver is linked to having these pale eyes. And that's obvious, right? Because Jonas tried to give memories to Lily and his dad and his friend Asher, and it didn't work. But it worked with Gabriel, and Gabriel has the light eyes. So obviously there's a connection there. Another thing I want to call your attention to is I want you to think about why the committee of elders would decide to give Gabriel an extra year to catch up. If they don't really do it for anybody else, why is Gabriel the exception? Obviously, it has to do with the fact that he has light eyes, right? And the fact that he could be a potential receiver in the future. So maybe that's why they're keeping Gabriel alive longer than they would any other baby that was having problems. But now it gets complicated because Gabriel's status is still uncertain. And now that Jonas has given Gabriel this memory, if Gabriel is released, then he has the potential to release the memory that Jonas gave him to the rest of the community, just like the failed receiver did before Jonas. So it kind of gets complicated with Gabriel here now, because there's a possibility that more chaos could erupt in the community because of this memory. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's get through chapter 15. Jonas entered the annex room and realized immediately that it was a day when he would be sent away. The giver was rigid in his chair, his face in his hands. "I'll come back tomorrow, sir," he said quickly. Then he hesitated. "Unless maybe there's something I can do to help?" The giver looked up at him, his face contorted with suffering. "Please," he gasped, "take some of the pain." Jonas helped him to his chair at the side of the bed. Then he quickly removed his tunic and lay face down. "Put your hands on me," he directed, aware that in such anguish the giver might need reminding. The hands came, and the pain came with them and through them. Jonas braced himself and entered the memory which was torturing the giver. He was in a confused, noisy, foul-smelling place. It was daylight, early morning, and the air was thick with smoke that hung yellow and brown above the ground. Around him, everywhere, far across the expanse of what seemed to be a field, lay groaning men. A wild-eyed horse, its bridle torn and dangling, trotted frantically through the mounds of men, tossing its head, whinnying in panic. It stumbled finally, then fell, and did not rise. Jonas heard a voice next to him. "Water," the voice said in a parched, croaking whisper. He turned his head toward the voice and looked into the half-closed eyes of a boy who seemed not much older than himself. Dirt streaked the boy's face and his matted blond hair. He lay sprawled, his gray uniform glistening with wet, fresh blood. The colors of the carnage were grotesquely bright. The crimson wetness on the rough and dusty fabric, the ripped shreds of grass, startlingly green in the boy's yellow hair. The boy stared at him. "Water," he begged again. When he spoke, a new spurt of blood drenched the coarse cloth across his chest and sleeve. One of Jonas's arms was immobilized with pain, and he could see through his own torn sleeve something that looked like ragged flesh and splintery bone. He tried his remaining arm and felt it move. Slowly he reached to his side, felt the metal container there, and moved its cap, stopping the small motion of his hand now and then to wait for the surging pain to ease. Finally, when the container was open, he extended his arm slowly across the blood-soaked earth, inch by inch, and held it to his lips, to the lips of the boy. Water trickled into the imploring mouth and down the grimy chin. The boy sighed. His head fell back, his lower jaw dropping as if he had been surprised by something. A dull blankness slid slowly across his eyes. He was silent. But the noise continued all around. The cries of the wounded men, the cries begging for water and for mother and for death. Horses lying on the ground shrieked, raised their heads, and stabbed randomly towards the sky with their hooves. From the distance, Jonas could hear the thud of cannons, overwhelmed by pain. He lay there in the fearsome stench for hours, listened to the men and animals die, and learned what warfare meant. Finally, when he knew that he could bear it no longer and would welcome death himself, he opened his eyes and was once again on the bed. The giver looked as if he could not bear to see what he had done to Jonas. "Forgive me," he said. So this memory is exponentially worse as far as the pain that Jonas has experienced in comparison to any other memory that he's received. And that's because he just got a memory of war. And obviously war is not easy on anybody, and specifically this is the Civil War. And I know that, and we know that, because it mentions the gray uniform, there's horses, there's cannons, the fact that the boy that Jonas helped and then watched die was not much older than you guys are. And in World War I, you had to be 18 at least to fight in the war. So the Civil War, boys your age were fighting 100% in the war and had died in that war. So Jonas had to experience this. Not only did he feel pain from his own injuries, but he had to sit there and listen to animals and humans die around him. And that is the reality of war. I will say that Jonas does suffer from PTSD after this event, and if you don't know what PTSD means, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's kind of a reaction from your body after experiencing a traumatic event, and we're going to get into that more when we read the chapter where he experiences this. I know this was kind of a heavy chapter, but we're going to stop here for today. Make sure you complete the worksheets that go with chapter 14 and 15, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.